There exists something profoundly transformative about the moment when a person begins to discover their authentic strength. It isn't a loud proclamation or dramatic gesture. Instead, it manifests as a quiet revolution, a metamorphosis occurring in the depths of the soul, like a seedling emerging through soil before it reaches sunlight. This transformation often begins unexpectedly, a relationship ending, a betrayal uncovered, a significant loss, or simply an existential weariness that can no longer be ignored. Something inside whispers, enough. Enough pretending all is well. Enough maintaining connections that deplete energy. Enough compromising selfhood to belong. In that nearly imperceptible instant, a spark ignites. Not yet a flame, but sufficient to initiate a journey back towards authenticity. This return isn't always straightforward or comfortable, because in reconnecting with oneself, one encounters everything that's been concealed for years: suppressed anger, silenced desires, disconnected physical awareness, violated boundaries. The mirror reflects uncomfortable truths, but ones desperately needed. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the path towards becoming whole. For many women, that journey begins with healing their sexual wound. This extends beyond physical trauma to encompass psychological, emotional, and symbolic trauma, the result of growing up in a culture that simultaneously sexualizes, shames, fragments, and silences. This sexual wound isn't merely personal, it's ancestral. It's inscribed in her narrative, embodied physically, embedded in cellular memory. When she begins acknowledging this wound, something fundamental shifts. She can no longer perceive her existence, her pleasure, her intimate connections as before. This awakening, while discomforting, brings profound liberation. It means confronting what was previously only vaguely sensed, that her body isn't foreign territory, that her desires aren't shameful, that her voice deserves to be heard. Thus begins a brave process of inhabiting herself fully, occupying her body as sanctuary rather than battleground, engaging with her energy as resource rather than threat, embracing her story not to repeat, but to transform it. Here is where conflict often emerges. When a woman begins remembering herself, her surrounding world trembles. Close relationships, family, partners, friends may resist this evolved version of her. Some feel threatened, others confused, because she no longer seeks permission to feel. She no longer apologizes for her intensity. She no longer diminishes her radiance to avoid others' discomfort. This doesn't make her selfish. It makes her conscious, because she now understands she cannot heal in environments that sicken her, cannot flourish in spaces where she must wither to please others. Paradoxically, this empowerment may bring profound solitude, not from absence of companions, but because she faces herself unmasked. In this emotional nakedness, everything appears with painful yet transformative clarity. What she once tolerated now wounds her. What she once justified now disturbs her. What she once ignored now demands her attention. If you're finding value in this exploration of authentic selfhood and hidden emotional patterns, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue creating content that illuminates these profound psychological journeys. Now let's delve into how this understanding applies to romantic connections and the mysterious signals that reveal when someone is falling in love but can't express it. Yet within that fertile solitude, a powerful seed takes root, the seed of renewed identity, an identity no longer dependent on external validation, no longer moulded to others' expectations. It's the identity of someone who has seen themselves wholly, shadow and light, and chosen unconditional self-embrace. This person isn't perfect, but they're whole. They don't possess all knowledge, but they trust their voice. They don't have every answer, but they walk confidently knowing their truth deserves expression. From depth psychology's perspective, this process represents an alchemical act, transforming pain into awareness, chaos into wisdom, fragmentation into unity. The path isn't easy, but it's among the most sacred journeys one can undertake. It means deprogramming learned behaviours, shedding inherited patterns, and beginning to construct from the soul. It requires renouncing comfort to embrace truth. So if you find yourself at a crossroads where everything seems to be disintegrating, if continuing as before feels impossible, yet the way forward remains unclear, perhaps you aren't lost. Perhaps you're awakening. An awakening, though initially bewildering, represents the greatest act of self-love possible. It's not about becoming someone else, but returning to yourself, to the person you were before the pain, before the expectations, before the forgetting. This is where the second sign frequently appears, subtle yet heartbreaking. He's beginning to fall in love but cannot emotionally sustain it. He pursues you with brilliant, almost hungry intensity, then vanishes without warning or clear explanation. One day he seems completely surrendered to your presence, full of gestures, words and attentions that make you feel recognized, desired, significant. The next day, this same person disappears as if none held genuine meaning. Messages go unanswered. Calls never materialize. A once warm gaze turns distant. This contrast creates not only confusion but pain. Just when you began opening up, reciprocating affection, lowering defenses, he constructs a wall. Questions follow. What changed? Where did our promising connection fracture? Did I cause this? Rarely lies the answer externally. He didn't withdraw because feelings faded. He withdrew because he felt too intensely. In feeling, his fears surfaced. Primal fears of experiencing pain again, repeating past traumas, exposing vulnerability without certainty of safety. His mind reacts like a fortress under siege, raising defences, manufacturing excuses, even sabotaging itself with thoughts like, "This is progressing too rapidly," or "I'm not prepared," or "I don't want to hurt you." Yet these phrases conceal rather than reveal truth. They expose his fear. This is where many women stumble unknowingly. They interpret his contradictions as disinterest, as if initial expressions of affection were fabrications, but they weren't. These contradictions don't indicate absence of feeling, but internal conflict. He's torn between the part yearning to surrender and the part warning that surrender leads to destruction. The man isn't always conscious of this battle. Externally, he may appear manipulative, inconsistent, self-centered. Usually he isn't. He's not manipulating from coldness, but from inner turmoil. He's not playing games with you, he's wrestling with himself. When involved with someone falling in love yet afraid, everything about him resonates with ambiguity. He wants closeness, but doesn't know how to maintain it. He yearns for you, but fears the power you wield over his emotional landscape. His self-protection mechanism involves periodic disconnection, becoming elusive, rationalizing his emotions. I'd love to hear about your experiences with emotionally complex relationships in the comments below. Have you encountered someone who showed these contradictory signals? How did you navigate it? Don't forget to like this video if you're finding these insights helpful, and share it with anyone struggling to understand similar relationship patterns. Your engagement helps our community grow and allows us to reach more people seeking clarity in their connections. Naturally, you feel compelled to demand clarity, to question why his brightness dims when previously ablaze. How could you not seek answers when your heart becomes vulnerable to someone who offered something special, then seemingly retracts it without explanation? Here lies a silent truth. Pressuring a conflicted man drives him further away, not because he's indifferent, but because he feels increasingly overwhelmed. He doesn't need rescue, but he needs emotional presence. He doesn't need you to erase yourself, but he needs you anchored in your strength, not dissolving in his chaos, but witnessing it with inner fortitude. For him, love equates to pain, not because you inflict it, but because love necessitates lowering defenses. This process hurts like removing armor worn throughout life. What options exist? Look beyond words. Listen beyond silences. Language can deceive, but energy cannot. Observe. Does he invariably return despite disappearances? Does he seek you out while claiming unreadiness? Do his gestures betray him? Does his gaze reveal what his words withhold? If amid chaos exists one constant, his desire for proximity, however awkwardly expressed, genuine emotional involvement exists. The issue isn't indefinitely awaiting emotional maturation, but learning to recognize deeper indicators that love exists, even when struggling to surface unimpeded. One undeniable indicator is physical presence. There exists something no man can fully conceal, body language. Even with evasive words or doubtful speech, his body communicates. It speaks through torso orientation, through seeking your gaze when believing himself unobserved, through seemingly accidental repeated touches occurring unconsciously. Jung clarified, the unconscious expresses itself not only through dreams, but through gestures, posture, micro-expressions. In this silent bodily theatre, authentic feelings frequently reveal themselves. Attend closely. What does his body do in your presence? Does he lean towards you without actual contact? Does he observe silently with a gaze, conveying more than words express? Do his pupils dilate, meeting yours? Does his breathing pattern alter? Does his voice change? His laughter soften? These subtle, nearly imperceptible details reveal profoundly. They aren't calculated seduction tactics or rehearsed gestures. They represent unconscious fissures through which unexpressed feelings escape. Additionally, watch for nervousness, that awkward discomfort arising in your presence. Fidgeting hands, touching neck, inappropriate laughter, bodily awkwardness. Such restlessness isn't indifference but emotional impact. The body, when touched by love, responds truthfully because the unconscious cannot deceive. Observe him during silence, remaining nearby without speaking, seeking you during conversations with others, departing reluctantly as if physically resistant to leaving. These signs, these gestures convey what remains verbally unexpressed, that you affect him emotionally. This disarms him because physical communication persists even when the soul retreats in fear. If you comprehend this profound language, you perceive beyond contradictions, beyond emotional fluctuations. You understand his love isn't broken promise, but truth he's still learning to embody. Here we reach a crucial insight, subtle yet profoundly important. Avoid confronting him with rational arguments. Avoid bombarding him with direct questions. Avoid forcing articulation of what he cannot yet name. When a man becomes lost in his emotional labyrinth, logical pressure doesn't liberate him. It drives him deeper into concealment, not from unwillingness to answer, but from lacking answers even for himself. Love, experienced fearfully, doesn't enter through intellect. It seeps through physical fissures, through spaces reason cannot access, through involuntary gestures beyond control. Here you possess a silent, powerful gift, to observe, to listen, not to words but energy, not to speech but action. His body becomes his sole honest translator. From this attentive, non-judgmental listening without forcing definitions, ask yourself, what do you need? Supporting someone through emotional discovery differs from remaining where your clarity suffocates while awaiting theirs. Remember the essential truth: the body doesn't lie. As Jung noted, the soul often speaks through physical expression long before finding appropriate words. When the soul secretly falls in love, when the heart begins beating differently despite mental resistance, behavior changes before speech. Small gestures, tiny actions, everyday decisions sequentially form an emotional map more revealing than any verbal confession. Here appears the fourth subtle indicator. Despite confusion, he's beginning to fall in love. He starts caring for you spontaneously through seemingly insignificant actions he himself might not consider important, yet reflecting growing emotional connection without his awareness. He avoids grand declarations but checks your safe arrival home after late outings. During illness, he appears with assistance unasked. Sensing anxiety, he reaches out, a message, a joke, an unexpected gesture. These aren't declarations but presences, not strategies, but genuine protective and connective impulses. This represents love's initial expression in its most human form: care. These gestures hold immense value because they arise unfiltered, uncalculated, without expectation. They aren't designed to seduce or impress, but reflect something growing internally, tenderness taking shape before full comprehension. This makes them authentic, soul-sourced, rather than ego-driven, actions seeking no acknowledgement yet revealing more than countless words. You'll notice without formal announcement, he includes you in his world. He doesn't formally invite, but mentions you to friends. He shares music reminding him of you. He shows photographs because daily occurrences evoked your laughter. He modifies plans to see you without acknowledging the reason. He solicits your opinion on meaningful matters as if your perspective earned special significance. These clearly indicate that although mentally negotiating fears, his heart moves differently. Perfection and consistency aren't guaranteed. Silent days, awkwardness, withdrawals will occur. But learning to read these subtle details helps distinguish between casual interest and someone who, though unable to articulate it, chooses you profoundly. Genuine love rarely arrives dramatically. Sometimes it appears thus: seemingly insignificant gestures, tonal shifts, lingering glances, shy questions, shared memories, inexplicable laughter. When this happens, the soul speaks, even as words fail. At this juncture, many women experience profound confusion. They hear explicit statements rejecting relationships, claiming emotional unreadiness, declaring inability to offer more. Yet they observe contradictory actions. He remains present in details, spontaneous care, constant attention defying logic if distance were truly desired. Within this apparent contradiction emerges true emotional wisdom, observing pattern beyond words. In matters of soul, actions consistently outshine words in honesty. If gestures remain warm, actions consistent, presence maintained with tenderness and attention despite evasive or denying language, real emotional involvement exists. He may not recognize or name it, but his soul engages fully. Depth psychology explains this as dissociation between ego and self. The ego, responding to obligation, control, cultural programming about proper behavior, still resists. But the self, Jung's term for being's deep core, where authentic desires reside, acts without ego's permission. Thus, when he cares without seeking recognition, appears without apparent reason to check your well-being, subtly adjusts routines to align with yours, you aren't imagining things. You're witnessing non-rational love expression, emerging not from conscious intention, but unconscious connection. Paradoxically, these gestures may contain fear. His history may include abandonment, betrayal, or suffering shaping current behavior. Perhaps he learned love risks loss. Surrender equals suffering. So he approaches yet maintains distance, provides care without acknowledging it as love, contributes significantly, then minimizes it. Mentioning these actions lightly prompts dismissal. It's nothing, he'll claim. But you recognize something meaningful because love isn't always verbalized. Sometimes it's simply enacted. When someone cares without expecting reciprocation, without awareness of doing so, that represents love in purest form. As Jung stated, what we deny controls us. What we accept transforms us. He may deny feelings, but love transforms him internally, gradually, beyond his control. This transformation isn't always luminous. Here, we encounter one of unconscious love's most bewildering, painful moments. Just as everything improves, connection deepens, gestures speak louder than words, he withdraws. Without preceding argument or logical explanation, just distance, silence, vague excuses, coldness replacing warmth. Naturally, you question your actions. Truth is, you did nothing wrong. The bond didn't break. On contrary, it penetrated deeply enough to touch his wound, frightening him. Jung understood this phenomenon as shadow activation. Repressed aspects, traumas, insecurities, memories hidden even from oneself. Genuine love, built without masks or games, brings not only joy, but opens sealed doors, unearths forgotten memories, awakens deliberately suppressed emotions. All this can overwhelm. When truly falling in love, he doesn't necessarily surrender. Sometimes he panics, panic about feeling, trusting, vulnerability, perhaps childhood wounds, past rejections, learned associations between affection and loss explain this. So your tenderness, presence, emotional authenticity making him feel prompts retreat for self-protection rather than closer exploration. This represents emotional flight, far more common than recognized. For someone whose emotional history features abandonment or instability, love isn't refuge but danger, not opportunity but threat. That's why genuine falling in love often triggers distancing. Mistaking this withdrawal for indifference is erroneous. Often he retreats not from diminished feeling, but overwhelming emotion. This emotional flood activates old memories he cannot manage. Jung observed the shadow awakens in these moments: rejection fear, unworthiness feelings, childhood terror. The openness leads to collapse. Faced with this, the mind closes doors. But the heart doesn't want departure. The wound cries for protection. The fifth subtle sign he's falling in love despite denial. He avoids you precisely when connection flourishes most. Silence, confusion, withdrawal aren't necessarily endings, but expressions of a soul untrained in holding the very love it craves. While healing him isn't your responsibility, understanding this process helps absolve self-blame for uncontrollable circumstances and make decisions from awareness rather than wounds. Touching the soul's intimate regions doesn't merely illuminate, but exposes not just beauty, but fragility, hidden aspects, injuries. When someone once close suddenly withdraws, avoid interpreting it as personal rejection or indifference. Sometimes distance occurs precisely because he cares more than he can manage, because feelings exceed protective frameworks, because emotional overflow triggers mental retreat. The solution isn't pursuit, demanding explanations, or manipulative retention. Your greatest loving act towards him and yourself is maintaining groundedness. Remembering his process isn't your burden. Offer emotional safety and loving presence, but never crawl for love unready to stand. Don't sacrifice well-being awaiting fear resolution. Authentic love isn't built on pursuit or anxious waiting, but when two individuals, each on personal journeys, willingly hold emotional intimacy with awareness and responsibility. Jung noted consciousness awakening never occurs without pain, often beginning with fear recognition. So withdrawal during apparent closeness, sudden distance, unexplained avoidance isn't lovelessness, but evidence of your profound impact. Your presence attracts but also confronts him. Perhaps confronting his shadow, choosing not to flee himself, he returns, but transformed, more present, authentic himself. If this happens, it no longer depends on you. After fear, contradictions, unexplained withdrawals, sometimes, only sometimes, breaking points occur. Moments subtle or sudden, gradual or abrupt, when resistance becomes impossible, inner truth prevails. He surrenders not as battlefield defeat, but as ceasefire in self-conflict. This sixth subtle sign indicates love he finally cannot deny. This change rarely arrives with poetic declarations or eternal promises. Sometimes surrender shows most powerfully through presence. He stays. He's there. He chooses you. He builds without grand declarations, without excuses, without unnecessary distance. He authentically reveals himself, less fearful of visibility. Though verbally awkward, his energy transforms. No longer fleeing, he wants to stay and learn despite lingering fears. From Jung's perspective, this moment represents pivotal inner progress, shadow integration. The man who projected fears, avoided commitment, lived tensely between feeling and showing, now accepts emotions as legitimate aspects of being. This restores inner power long hostage to fear. He fears feeling less, needs less self-sufficiency imagery. For the first time he might say, I promise imperfection, but want to try with you. With you, I feel home despite internal trembling. These aren't impressive phrases, but truths emerging when self-conflict ceases. This brave surrender to feeling exceeds romantic fantasy, emerging not from idealization, but emotional work, fear, recognition, conscious choice to stop running. Important clarification, not all reach this point. Many remain shorebound, lost in avoidance, self-deception, depth fear. Only those courageous enough for introspection, wound-touching, armour-shedding, cross this threshold, separating them from authentic love. When they truly do, everything changes. They no longer minimize affection or prompt self-doubt, because love no longer threatens but represents undeniable truth. You who witnessed shadows, read beyond contradictions, maintain strength through silences, now face a choice. Embrace mature love or continue your journey. If your path advanced while he lingered, know this with peaceful soul. If he finally surrenders to feelings, it represents strength born from ceasing flight. Loving isn't fearlessness, but choosing presence, openness, love despite bone-deep fear. This gesture, so human, imperfect, profound, proves unconscious love has transformed from shadow to light. When someone stops running and starts staying, ease doesn't automatically follow. Staying initiates a beautiful yet challenging phase, rebuilding. Because conscious loving, after confronting fear, isn't continuing unchanged, but learning to live with scars, painful emotional memories, vulnerability no longer denied, but integrated within relationship. The man crossing his shadow threshold who chooses love perceives differently, no longer hiding behind excuses, acting from reflex or fear. He speaks from feeling despite verbal stumbling. His presence stabilizes, consistency increases. His care transcends instinct to become choice, daily renewed. Authentic love requires continual nourishment through small yet intentional, conscious daily acts. You who travelled this path sense it, formerly erratic, ambivalent, tense energy settling. No more interpreting confusing signals or weathering emotional fluctuations. You see arrival and continuation. You see world sharing without fear. You see listening and understanding, not as placation, but genuine presence, Such relationships need no hiding, proving, or competitive loving. Silence games and distancing tactics cease because both understand silence's painfulness when employed defensively rather than for understanding. The space between becomes honest territory, where insecurities have place without dictating actions. Love traversing shadow, recognizing wounds, choosing persistence seeks not perfection but presence, where true intimacy begins. If you recognize yourself as one who waited, understood, yet grew simultaneously, know your strength wasn't in enduring patience, but in self-choosing consciousness while loving. If you're him, running until exhausted, hiding until meaningless, know vulnerability isn't weakness but doorway towards authenticity, because genuine love doesn't complete us but opens us, doesn't perfect us but reveals us,